I've tested all the M5 machines and I'd like to share the result with you. Let's go. I'm ArtIsRight. There are two M5 silicons that I have not shown a result yet. We're going to focus on those and we're going to take a look at the whole entire M5 lineup to see if you upgrade the variants and also the silicon family going from, for instance, vanilla to the Pro to the Max, how much of the performance scaling you're going to get. This is going to be a good one and a comprehensive look at the M5. Now, we're also going to take a look separately at the M5 MacBook Air with all brand new testing for all the Air models going back to the M1. That's going to be a separate video, is coming later on. And I'll also have another video talking about the MacBook Neo, which are not really created for anyone doing heavy creative workflow like many of you guys watching my channel. But nonetheless, I think it is a really compelling machine, especially for the educational market. And we're going to talk about that and also do pro photography stuff testing on there, to which it's not really doing too good. But nonetheless, like I said, it's not really made for us. And we're also going to take a look at the Apple Studio Display XDR because there are no products like that on the market right now, and it is a really compelling display. Now, I am testing it. I'm learning a lot more about it. I'm still testing it right now, but I've also released an initial impression video about that, to which you are going to learn a lot. I'll leave a link to that in the description. And as usual, please pause this video so you can analyze the result yourself in addition to the analysis I'll be sharing with you. Timestamp will be coming later on because as it is, I'm barely sleeping. Now, if you find this information helpful, everything that I'm doing here are pretty much self-funded. I'll leave a link to my tip jar in the description, or you can also use YouTube Super Thanks. This is one way that you can help contribute to this cause that I am doing here. Now, the only thing you can do is tapping on that like button and subscribing. If you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate that too. If you could share this video with your friends or colleague, post on the forums, I would even appreciate that more because it gets more eyes on these videos, because these are really great content. And lastly, please remember that this is a one-person channel, so be kind in the comments. If I do make a mistake, just point it out. I will correct them in a future video. And I'm only human, so I will admit that I'm making mistakes too. And the other thing too, not sleeping is going to cost me to make mistakes. All right, so interestingly enough, in this generation, Apple have gone with a new CPU design that has Super Core and Performance Core. From what I can see from iStat menu, the program is recognizing all the performance core. It doesn't recognize the super core yet. However, it's not recognizing that any of these systems right now, the Pro and the Max, have any efficiency core. Now, whether the programs are going to be able to utilize all these core properly or not is another story. But based on this, I don't think they're really doing that just yet. So, upcoming system, like I said, M5 Air and MacBook Neo, that'll be coming a little bit later on. The one that we're going to be focusing on are pretty much this: the M5 Pro top silicon and the M5 Max base silicon. Now, when I'm talking about top and base, I'm really just referring to the silicon. So just FYI there. Interestingly enough, once we have reached the top Pro, the CPU remains the same. 6 super core, 12 performance core. The only variations you're going to get there is the number of GPU. The NPUs are the same, although you will also see that the memory bandwidth are different. Now, I will tell you right now that for photography and video app right now, for these creative app, none of them really go in and utilize the full memory bandwidth, so I would not worry about it. However, yes, there are other apps out there that utilize the full bandwidth, but for what we do, it's really not there. This is not a metric that's going to change the way how your machine or the app is actually functioning. 24 gigabytes memory versus 36, 1 terabyte SSD versus 2 terabyte, and you're looking at around a $1,200 price delta. Now, I would argue that this machine sits at the sweet spot right now for anybody looking to get the machine that's not too much. And if this singular configuration can work for what you need, I think that's going to be really fantastic, because the only way you can upgrade for more RAM in the system is you have to upgrade the silicon as well. And by that time, you are paying $500 more and not just the $300 for the silicon upgrade. So the delta for here is $500, the delta for here is $1,200, and the delta for here is pretty much another $500. So these are just something to think about. Although for this one, if you're really doing work for revenue, it can work. If you're doing a lot of Photoshop stuff only, that may be a great computer. But if you're doing anything with raw processing at all, I would probably steer you more towards the Max machine. Now, I'll also include the results from all these vanilla silicons going all the way back to M1, but the one that I recently tested with brand new results are pretty much the M4, M5. Same thing with the Max, the M4 are having the latest result. Pros and all these desktop Macs have been retested. So not all of the configuration are possible. I mean, it would just be financially not feasible for me to do that. However, the resources usage on this is known, and I put the resource that the program is using on the system on every single one of my slides, so you can extrapolate the data very easily. And it has not really changed. Computing at the very fundamental has not changed. Even though this is running on RISC now, it does not change the resources used in all this. Now, I'm going to approach this with a pro state of mind because this is what I do, pro photo, pro video, and so forth. So this is where I'm coming from. And the other thing too is I want to see day one performance, because even though sometimes we have all these amazing machines with these amazing hardware, for instance, Lightroom Classic did not release GPU support until late 2025 in version 14.5.1. And the silicon, Apple Silicon itself, that has a lot of GPU in the system, for example, the Pro and the Max have been around since 2021. So that gives you some perspective. Don't configure more than what you need, although where it is today, I mean, getting a base machine that you're going to work out with is going to be a good idea. Configuration and buyer guides will be towards the end. And remember, there are silicon segmentation that these are more of the consumer leaning one. There is the more pro oriented. These are more of like the pro lineup. And then there's always the Extreme Pro, which is in the desktop version, although this is now 2 generations behind. Upgrade priority. To get the most bang for your buck, I highly recommend upgrading the RAM on the system before you do anything else. Next, I would think about upgrading the chip family if you need to do that, and storage on the system. The chip variants, going for the extra GPU core, the extra CPU core, is something that I recommend dead last, because you don't see as much of a performance improvement as much as just upgrading RAM in the system when you're really using your computer day in, day out. Now, Nano Texture display, if you have any questions about that, I prefer Nano Texture display, which is also the reason why some of my machines are coming in much later than the normal one, so it's not directly on launch day. And I made a video talking about that, so I'll leave a link to this in the description. You can definitely check that out. And I will also say this too, that some have argued that, well, don't order Nano Texture, just get a screen protector that has matte coating. It's really not the same. I'll probably make a video talking about that because there are nuances on it. And interestingly enough, the matte screen protector does reflect more, way more than the Nano Texture. All right, so the calibration pass for both software calibration and to calibrate the Apple Studio Display XDR, and also hardware calibration on hardware calibration capable display for professional color workflow does pass as well. As usual, I highly recommend setting these up as a new machine so that it doesn't really bring all the logs and all the files from the previous system or the previous OS that hasn't been cleaned up or not going to get cleaned up into this new system. So don't use system migration or time machine restore. Just start fresh is a better way to do that. And especially if you're coming from Intel generation, you definitely do not want to bring the Intel binary over. Here's how you would read the specs for all these testing. Feel free to pause this so you can see that. And now let's talk about SSD. So for SSD, you can always expand this using a NAS, DAS, and so forth. My only one recommendation for SSD would be as follows. Get the size you need, but if you're looking for an external one, especially if you're going to use it on macOS, definitely make sure that you get a USB 4 or a Thunderbolt type connection, because the trim command would then work properly. If you're using a USB 3.0 or any other technology, Apple doesn't really send trim command over. And this is where your SSD is, as it starts to fill up, it's going to act like it's going to crash. It's not working well anymore. So just a little FYI there. As far as the overall SSD speed, there are no more like arguments that we can make about like, oh my gosh, my system is like having slow SSD, or a reviewer finding out like, oh wow, the SSD that much slow, one of those like gotcha things in the machine, right? So we don't have that anymore. These are really fast now, probably more so than we need. Now, speaking of speed, one of the things I will tell you that I have a previous video that I made, these are still, the information inside this video is still validated. I'll leave a link to this in the description, but this is telling you that you don't need to go out and buy the fastest 7,000 megabytes per second SSD out there, that if you have 1,000 megabytes per second, most of the time, you're not really going to see any difference whatsoever in pro photo and video workflow. Unless you're constantly working with like 6 or 8K or something like that, then get what you need. But if you're just mostly doing photos, what I said in this video are still going to be valid. Now, when it comes to RAM, remember, there's no upgrading this. Whatever you configure with your system is pretty much that. So consider your use case, consider your modality. If this is your primary machine, get a little bit more RAM. It doesn't hurt. You get to keep your machine longer. Especially if you plan to keep your machine, just definitely get more RAM, because everything is going to demand more. It's non-upgradable. There's no way to expand it. And if you're an Intel holdout right now, I would maybe, jump up from what you have on your Intel. I would say the magic number though would probably be like, the 24 is not bad, but I would say the 36 one or 48 will probably be a magic number that you might not need to go higher than that, but depending on your use case. My recommendation though, if you are a Creative Pro and you already have a Mac, restart your system, know how much memory you have on your system, launch Activity Monitor, go into the Memory tab, and pay attention to the memory pressure. Towel your windows in a way that you can see this in the background as you're going through the creative app that you're using on a day-to-day basis. Push it hard and see where you're at. If you're in green, the amount of memory that you have is fine. If it's yellow or red, definitely consider getting more for your system. iStat Menu 7 is another program that I love because it keeps stats for up to 30 days. And I think it can even go longer than that. I'll leave a link to this in the description. I'm not paid by them, but I really love their product. So as I always advocate, 16 gigabytes of RAM is pretty much the minimum for any creative pro out there. And I'm so thankful that all these machines now come with at least 16, especially in the Pro and the Max. We now start at 24 and 36, a much better number overall for creative pros. Now, when I tested the machine, I just set the power to auto. I did not put it into high power mode or anything like that at all, because I found out that putting it into high power mode does not really improve the speed and performance by that much, if at all, in all of my previous generation testing. So I don't do that. Mac manages this really well. Now, I do have a comment on the fan and when it kicks in. So these are my observation. The 14-inch one, fan kicks in quite a bit. The 2 Max one, fan does kick in quite a bit. The one where it doesn't really kick in quite as much is the M5 Pro inside the 16-inch model. That one, the fan doesn't kick in as much, but it does kick in after a while, but nonetheless, it's much less than the other machines. So just a little FYI there if you're worried about that. But here's the thing. These computers are going to throttle, they're going to slow down the silicon because it doesn't want it to burn up. These are all normal things. So get the machine that you need. If you want the 14-inch one because you either have disability issues or you need to have a machine that's really light, you don't want to carry a lot of weight in addition to all your gears, but you want the most performance possible and you want to get the top Max silicon, don't let me stop you. Definitely, that should be the one that you would get. Now, I've tested all these apps using multiple different versions because some of them are using the historical testing data and so forth, but you get the idea for that. And there are slow down trends over time. But when it comes to Lightroom Classic and also Lightroom, I throw a shrug in the air, and I've used all these versions because, especially on these newer machines, something is really going on. On the import is utilizing all the CPU, and it's also utilizing GPU as well, but on the export, for instance, it's just utilizing the 6 cores. And I would hope that those are the 6 super cores and not just the regular performance cores, which it would seem like so, but it's not utilizing everything. And the CPU are barely peaking when it's actually doing all those. I want you to go in and just hit the machine hard so I can get things done as fast as possible. All right, so now let's take a look at the result. 1000 Sony a7R5 61 megapixel file. These are the way how I shot it in the camera. And this is pretty much the M5 Max base, M5 Pro top. There are some time variation between these two. Remember, this represents $1,200. You have to answer for yourself whether this is worth it or not. But if you're going to take a look at this in a few slides, I think it will make sense why you might want to consider the Max Silicon. Here are the rest of the M5 generation in the lineup. The top Max is still coming up with the very top, although just having 8 more GPU cores and 12 more gigabytes of memory cause you to cut the time in almost half. Something is really going on here, and you're going to see that too. As I add in more machines, the numbers are not really making a lot of sense. This is scaling in a way that somewhat makes sense, but it should have been much faster than this. And even though I say it somewhat makes sense, it doesn't, because the M5 is performing faster than the 2 Pros. And by the way, I ran the test on the 2 Pros a few times. Sometimes they even come up longer than this. So something's happening there. Here it is when we add in the previous generation machine. I always put in the Ultra as an anchor point to see where that is. M4 Max, M4 Pro. Interestingly enough, the M4 Pro is performing better than the base Max and also the 2 M5 Pro. So yeah, like I said, this does not make sense at all. This number, I mean, all these numbers from that below should have been much shorter than that. So something is really going on, with the exception of the M5. Here are the rest of the machine in a lineup so you can compare. Now let's take a look at export. So taking all these same files, we're going to export them. And this is a CPU and GPU based task. And like I said before, this is not utilizing this well at all because the time variation is less than a minute between these two. What happened when we add the rest of the machine in a lineup? Less than a minute, a little bit more, and the M5 is coming up at the bottom. The way how it's scaling makes sense, but when we add in the previous generation, the way how this is running right now, M4 Max is coming up at the top. And this is the base M4 Max, not M5, the previous generation one. M3 Ultra. Genuinely speaking, this particular one is supposed to be up there. It's really not quite, and it's taking about 3 minutes, a little bit over 3 minutes long, or close to 3 minutes longer. Why is that the case? This is really not making a lot of sense. And as we scale down, for example, the M4 Pro is performing faster than the 2 M5 Pro. Something is going on with Lightroom Classic. Here are the rest of the machine in the lineup. Now, import, export are the wonky ones. When we do the rest of a task, they become a little bit less wonky. So now let's take a look at HDR Merge and Lightroom Classic. So for this, timing are exactly the same because it's just using one singular CPU core to do this task. When we add the rest of the machine in the lineup from the M5, they are all about the same besides just the vanilla M5 taking a little bit longer. And for the other machines, well, it's clustering according to generation. So the M5 is clustering one way, the M4 generation is clustering one way, the M3 generation is clustering with just the M5 vanilla. So just a little bit interesting things to note there. Here are the rest of the machines for HDR Merge. Panorama Merge, taking 14 Nikon D810 to generate a 314 megapixel file. And if we take a look at this, yes, it is faster. And this is a task that uses CPU and RAM in combination. So having more RAM in the system on this one, even though the CPU on this is pretty much the same, is making a big difference. Although, when I add in the next slide, you're going to see that if you're constantly doing these tasks, 36 may be a magic number that works well for you because guess what? This is really not that much faster at all. And it has the same amount of CPU to process all these data. Now the M5 top one is falling a little bit more behind, and then the 14-inch one, this is scaling in the way how we would have expected. And with this one, only 16 gigabytes of memory, it's still under 2 minutes. It's really not that big of a deal. But what happens when we add in the previous generation machine? So let's see here. M3 Ultra still sits at the very top, but it's only 2 seconds faster, which is, I would say this is a rounding error at this point. They're really close to each other. So 36 may be good for a lot of panorama merge. So that's the first thing. And if you're just running Lightroom as a singular program, if you run multiple different programs, then definitely do get more memory, especially if you have a browser or a lot of tabs open. If you're crazy like me, get more memory, please. It's going to work much better for you in the long run. These are where the M5 is. Interestingly enough, the M4 Max is coming in here and the M4 Pro are coming up a little bit behind. I would say there's something really going on with the M4 Pro score because this shouldn't really be this high with 24 gigabytes of memory, but something is going on with the panorama merge on here too. So some slight wonkiness, but for the most part, the machine are scaling away how we would have expected. Here are the rest of the machines so you can compare the result from what you have based on the new machines. All right, AI noise reduction. This is one of those things where I see comments that, oh, I'm using a MacBook Air and it's taking forever. Yeah, this is why you don't use MacBook Air for professional workflow, especially if it's going to be your primary machine. So let's take a look. Having more GPU cores, it's going to make a difference. 12 more really cuts the time down by about 6 minutes or so. This may not seem like much, but it's only for one file. When we start to extrapolate this to tens, if not hundreds of files, this is going to save you an immense amount of time. When we add the rest of the machine in the lineup, well, the way how they're scaling makes sense, right? More GPU, the faster this task is, and the one with only 10 core is taking 43 seconds. I mean, I would say this, for one picture to take 43 seconds, that's getting excruciating. And when you see the result from like the MacBook Air one, it's even longer than that, to which I'm like, oh, this is way too long. Anyway, when we add in the previous generation, this is where the M3 Ultra comes in. So, right, more GPU cores. Now this is a task, by the way, that's really supposed to be running on NPU, but there are issues with like color fringing or things are not coming out right, artifacts happening, which is why Adobe is just defaulting back to GPU. Hopefully in the future, this will be running on the NPU, to which we're going to see, I think, a much bigger speed improvement than this. This is where the M4 Max is coming in, and this is where the M4 Pro is coming in right there. So you can see the result. Not bad at all. I mean, if you have a previous generation machine, especially if you have an M4 Max, I probably would not even think about upgrading at this point in time. And here are the rest of the machine for this singular file AI noise reduction. Now, let's take a look at what happens when we do 10 file AI noise reduction with a combo of multiple different cameras. See, this is where things start to compound. It's a little bit over a minute faster. Now, this is only for 10 files. You may say this is not a big deal, but when you start to add in even more files than that, it starts to make sense. Now going for the top silicon with the top GPU, 8 more, does that make sense? This is less than a minute apart. I wouldn't say that is a big deal at all. And I would say that this is really a good sweet spot for Creative Pro. If you can, just live with the spec that Apple gives you there, I think you're going to be good. So this is where the Pro is. It's starting to get a little bit long, and the 14-inch one is a little bit longer, and also the vanilla M5. That's where the timing is. When we add in previous generation machine, M3 Ultra is there. This is where the M4 Max is coming right behind the new Max generation. And this is where the M4 Pro is coming in right behind the M5 Pro generation. This is how the spread is supposed to be, by the way. The way how they're performing right now makes sense. So the result in here makes a lot of sense, right? Here are the rest of the machine in the lineup. And now let's take a look at Lightroom Classic, AI, Sky, and Subject Masking. So if you do portrait, if you do weddings and so forth, this is going to be a useful feature because you can select one, you can apply to the rest of the images. And let's see how long it takes. Because this is a CPU-based task, the timing are exactly the same. When we add in the rest of the machine, the timing are pretty much exactly the same. I would say for the most part, 1 second and 3 seconds here are a margin of error, that the speed of these silicons are performing where it is. But what happens when we add in the previous generation? Interesting enough, when I run this test, the M4 Pro is pulling up ahead by close to 10 seconds. 10 seconds is not, I wouldn't consider that a margin of error anymore. I would say there's something going on there that's causing this to happen. Also, the M4 Max is just a touch faster. These are so close to each other, but in general, I would say that the new M5 generation is supposed to be faster than these two, but we're really not seeing that. Now, where M3 Ultra is coming in, it makes sense, right? Because the CPU core is definitely 2 generations behind, or 1 or 2 generations behind, and it is a little bit slower. Here's the rest of the other machines, so you can see some time spread. This is not a task that takes a lot of time to do, or it takes a lot of effort on the machine, so it's able to handle it just fine. Now, let's take a look at Lightroom Desktop. Using all these 3 generations, the export is also still really wonky, as we're about to see right now. So, timing on this kind of makes sense, right? CPU, GPU, and RAM all in combination. Now, Lightroom Desktop does have a different algorithm for exporting and utilizing system resource in Lightroom Classic. This is the reason why I test both of them. And you can see that the timing here, this is more than double, right? By just having literally more RAM in the system. And also, I would argue, let's go back here for just a sec, more GPU. 12 more GPUs cause that much of a difference in the variation? Rather interesting. So what happened when we see the rest of the M5 generation? So the top M5 Max is here. This is the base M5 Max. Interestingly enough, the M5, the vanilla silicon, is actually performing ahead. And by the way, these two are taking over 20 minutes to export, and they're performing just about the same. Sadly enough, I tried to run this test multiple times, and on the Pro one is still performing similar to this or even worse. This is the best timing for those. So something is not right. What happened when we add in the previous generation, which shows us a lot more trend? M3 Ultra at the top. M4 Max slightly behind the latest M5 Max. And by the way, this M4 Max is the base silicon. It's faster than the current base M5 Max, which is 2 dots down, and M4 Pro is even faster than the M5 Max base silicon. I ran this test a few times. Results are like this. Something's not right. Here are the rest of the machine in the lineup for Lightroom Desktop Export. Now let's take a look at Capture One, which I would argue, in a way, I harp on Capture One for so many years now that, oh, their program doesn't go in and utilize resources well. And suddenly they released an update in the past few versions that have been doing really great and utilizing the resources really well. So for these two machines, timing are almost identical. And this makes a lot of sense because you have the exact same CPU on them. When we add the rest of the lineup in, well, these are really close to each other. This is just a little bit longer because there are a few less cores. All of this scales in a way that makes sense, right? But they're not really trying to complicate things by adding GPU into the import. They're just using CPUs. And seeing CPUs the way how they're supposed to run, this makes a lot of sense. Here are the previous generation machines. So this is with the M3 Ultra still coming up at the very top because it has way more CPUs, right? So all these scaling is making a lot of sense there. And this is where, for example, the M4 Max and also the M4 Pro is coming in. So you can see that it's having less CPU cores on the system, and all CPU cores is 1 generation behind. So the speed is probably a little bit slower. These make sense. And here are the rest of the machine for import data if you want to do some comparison. What about export? Now this is where we start to see some variation going from 12 more GPU cores, right? This is pretty good. When we add the rest of the machine in the lineup, the top one, by adding 8 more GPU cores, you're actually cutting time by quite a bit, but you're also paying a lot more money too. If this is something you do day in, day out, I would say, yeah, do that. And if it's, especially if you're only a machine, but if it's not, if you're just taking this on location to do the job, I would argue that again, the base M5 Max is probably a good one to look at. And it's definitely going to save you a lot more time over just the regular M5 Pro and definitely the M5 Vanilla, which is taking double the amount of time that the Pro is taking. When we add in the previous generation machine, Ultra is coming up at the very top. Max is following the M5 generation. The M4 Pro is following the M5 Pro generation. All these numbers make sense. And by the way, this is the top silicon, and it's a little bit slower than even just the base silicon inside the 14-inch one. This is also the base Max, and it's actually just a little bit below that, but it's still above like the M5 Pro. These number makes sense. Here are the rest of the machines in the lineup, so you can see that. And now we're going to take a look at Photoshop. This is just simply using Puget Bench. We're going to take a look at the score between these two, fairly close to each other, right? Let's take a look at the spread in the lineup for the M5 generation. I would argue that all these are so close that if the only thing that you do is Photoshop, this may even be a good machine and just literally upgrade it to 32 gigabytes of memory, and you just might be good to go. Especially if you're not doing a lot of raw files processing, noise reduction, and so on. These are something to really think about. This is why all these tests are done, so that you can look at your workflow, look at what you do most, and find the best machine for you. So when we add in all the previous generation machine, the M4 Max is coming just slightly behind there, the M4 Pro, and is definitely faster than the M3 Ultra. So the way how the numbers are spreading right now makes sense. And if you're just simply doing Photoshop, you may not necessarily need the M3 Ultra for this. I would probably maybe go for like the Max Silicon and then just really bump up the memory on your system. So those are things to consider. Here are the rest of the Photoshop score for Puget Bench in the lineup. And now let's take a look at the encoder decoder engine in Final Cut Pro. So the way how these are clustering makes sense. I just put all these score together. The Max are clustering together, Pro, and the Vanilla is taking a little bit longer. When we see all the results together, this is what it looked like, and I'll highlight the M5 generation so you can see where they cluster up. Interestingly enough, the M5 Pro and the M5 Max are a little bit faster now than the previous Pro generation. What I think is most impressive though is the fact that just the Vanilla M5 is doing a better job than the previous Pro one, and also the M5 Max there is sitting up at the very top, a little bit faster than the previous Max generation, but not really quite there where the Ultra is at this point in time for rendering. HEVC, similar story. You can see the way how they're spreading and clustering by the different silicon family, the Max Pro and the Vanilla. And here are the charts with the M5 being highlighted. So you can see they are faster than the previous generation. This is always something that is welcome. So if you're doing a lot of video work, definitely considering these machines, and you can see the way how they perform. Now let's take a look at ProRes 422. All the timings here are very similar to each other, with the regular Vanilla M5 taking just a touch longer. And here are the rest of the machines, so you can see the M5 group and where they're clustering. Interestingly enough, the Pro and the Max are clustering all the way to the top. The M5 is somewhere in the middle, but it's still faster than the Pro and the Max of some of the previous generation machine, as you are seeing there. AfterEffects. Puget Bench score, almost identical, 20 point apart. When we add in the rest of the machine in the lineup, still close enough to each other. I mean, they're not that huge of a spread at all. I mean, the scores are margins apart from each other. When we add in the rest of the machine in the lineup, for instance, the M5 Pro now, the top one, is performing better than the M4 Max, the base silicon from last generation. Rather interesting there. 14-inch M5 Pro is performing better than the 16-inch top M4 Pro silicon. So that's good to see, but again, I wouldn't necessarily go in and upgrade that because you're talking about a few hundred points. It's really not that big of a deal. M3 Ultra is coming in there. And here are the rest of the score for AfterEffects. Now, let's take a look at Premiere Pro. So for Premiere Pro, some score variation, but this is also utilizing a lot of GPU that are available in the system, and also some RAMs too. You can see that when we add the rest of the machine in the lineup, the spread becomes even a little bit further apart, where, for instance, the Max, the top one, it's more than double the regular Vanilla M5. So if you're doing a lot of video editing, this is the advocacy of why getting a Max Silicon or higher is probably something crucial. This is something that you do day in, day out, and you want to get work done as fast as possible. When we add in previous generation machine, M3 Ultra is there. This is where the M4 Max sit, and this is where the M4 Pro sits, right below the current M5 Max and also the M5 Pro. These number makes sense. Here are the rest of the Premiere Pro in the lineup. I don't have all the machines because the version changed on the algorithm for testing and the score changed. So the score doesn't line up anymore. I have to go and do all the testing, but that would be something that I'll probably do for the next cycle. Lastly, Resolve. So when we take a look at this, more GPUs on the system, right? More RAM at the very same time. The rest of the machines here perform in the way how we would have expected, and this is the way how the numbers are clustering right now. Interestingly enough, this is half the performance of like the Max one. So if you do a lot of this, Max Silicon makes a lot of sense. When we add in the previous generation machine, M3 Ultra sits at the very top still because it has a lot more resources for the program to go in to utilize and attack. M4 Max is there, M4 Pro is there. You get the chance to see that this new generation is definitely much faster. And this is the numbers that we generally would love to see, but we're not really getting at throughout, especially in many of the photo apps when it comes to heavy rendering tasks and so forth. Here are the rest of the score for DaVinci Resolve, so you can do some comparison. And this has pretty much been the M5 generation, from the vanilla M5, M5 Pro, M5 Max, and all the variety. So what are my thoughts? Well, it depends, right? First, what I want to do is quickly talk about the system. And if we take a look at all these together right now, let's throw out the 14-inch model so that we're just really looking at these silicons. And if we're taking a look at this, I already mentioned this early on that we're all looking at the same 18 CPU cores. The only variation in all of these are just the GPU. And I will also point out the memory bandwidth, which doesn't do anything. But you're also talking about the memory variation. If you're taking a look at this, taking a look at this chart this way, I argued this machine is definitely at the sweet spot. Yes, this is $1,200 more than this one, and the price to go up is $500 more to get more memory on both the memory and also the GPU. However, if you don't need that, if this M5 Max base is something that can work for you, and it has been working for me for a while because this is my secondary machine, one that is my everyday carry. When I'm at home, I have an Ultra, that's not a problem, but this is the one that works really well for me for going on the road, and is one that I think represents a good strike and balance in terms of price point and the performance you're going to get from majority of the app, whether they are optimized for the silicon yet or not. That's my thought. If you're a new purchaser to a Mac, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get a good experience regardless. If you're doing a lot of photo and video work, recommend getting the Max Silicon. It's going to make a big of a difference. Or look at the previous generation, look at clearance, look at reverb, look at the previous gen, look in the used market. I mean, there are a lot of people upgrading, and that might not be a bad idea at all. If you're going to upgrade though, because your current one does not have enough of components, for example, like it does not have enough memory, you need more memory, you need a better SoC, your modal change where you can no longer use like a desktop, you need a really more powerful machine. These are reasons why you might want to upgrade. So think about that carefully. I would argue at this point in time, if you're running on the M1 generation, probably time to nudge up, including even the Max Silicon. If you're on the M2 Max, I probably say you can rock that for a little bit longer. And I know there are many M1 Max users out there that are going to be rocking a little bit longer, but it is, you know, taking a little bit longer. And I'll do a separate video talking about just, for example, all the Max Silicon going all the way to M1, the Pro Silicon all the way to M1. That's going to be a good one to see too. But remember the upgrade priority. Memory is going to give you the most bang for your buck. The chip family, this is going, for example, from the Pro to the Max. That's going to give you a lot more performance overall. SSD size, and lastly, the chip variants. Upgrading to get more of the GPU cores or the CPU cores in the system, you're not going to see that much of a performance improvement for the price that you have to pay for it. RAM is going to be a better choice for this. Now, remember the SoC segmentation, but most importantly, this is a chart that I have made that recommends based on the app that you're using from good, better, best. If you read that across, you can kind of get the idea for this. I'm fairly solid on this recommendation. If you want better or best for like videos, for instance, the Max and Ultra are going to be the way to go, as you see there. For Capture One, I still argue that the Max and the Ultra are still going to be probably the best because you're going to get the most performance out of there. But if you want a laptop, Max is pretty much going to be the way to go. When it comes to Photoshop, I mean, genuinely, Just the M5 will probably do too, and I might actually include that in like the good machine. The only thing is that it ends at 32 gigabytes, and I know some of my friends who work with large files and it needs more processing power than that. That's part of the reason why I didn't really put the M5 silicon in there. And when it comes to like Lightroom Classic, you start to get the idea as what I'm telling you right now. Even though those silicons, for example, the M5 Pro fall under good, M5 Max fall under like better and so forth, it's not really utilizing it good or better at this point in time. But nonetheless, you get to see the point and the way how these are running. If you're thinking about upgrading, this is a good chart. Take a screenshot of this, circle the silicon that you're on, and just follow the path to see what might be a good next upgrade for you or the next silicon up in the chart. Sometimes I would argue that, for example, if you're in the M3 Pro, finding a refurb or like a used M3 Ultra desktop may not be a bad idea. It's going to really bump up the performance by quite a bit. Or simply go to the M5 Max, which is like the top one right now. And if you can get the sweet spot one, the one that I recommend, the base M5 Max, that would be even better. Anyway, that's my thought about the M5 generation. So pretty impressive design from Apple. There are a lot of big changes happening with the way how the SoC is being manufactured. I wish we had more option for CPUs and more option to configure that rather than just plateauing and having the same throughout the top Pro and the 2 Max silicon. The other thing too is the apps not being utilized kind of just irks me a little bit, but that's where we are. So we'll see in the future if that is going to be something that improves or not. Anyway, hope you find this helpful. Give this a like, subscribe, hit the bell if you're new. I'm Art, and I thank you for your time.